Hello and welcome back to the Across the Pod NFL podcast. I am, as ever, your host, Andy Davis, here to review Week 14 of the 2024 NFL season. And with me today, I've got a returning guest on the show. With me today, special guest Ben Isaacs. Ben, how are you?
I'm great, Andy. I'm in podcast heaven or podcast hell, depending on how you want to look at it, because I'm doing shows back to back. I've just done an episode of College Days because the conference championships have just happened and the playoff bracket has been revealed. Now I'm flipping over into NFL mode. It's more heaven than hell. I enjoy it too much, Andy. You know what it's like. It's addictive.
Oh, couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And you think, like all of us, doing all the London games, doing all this content, multiple things, you think you'd get maybe sick of the sport, but we don't. We still come here. We still come back every year. We still do these podcasts. We just love it too much.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sick of the Chicago Bears, but I'm not sick of the sport. Oh, we can get on to the Bears.
And for those of you who love fantasy football, head over to fantasygameday.app and download for your chance to win £7.50 back after your first lineup is set by using the code Andy5, 18 plus, and begambleaware.org. So let's head into the start of week 14. It is, of course, which was the game of the week going into it on paper, two of the three best teams, I think, in the conference, in the Packers and the Lions. And we got a really good game. Ended up, the score in total was a score of 34-31 to the Detroit Lions, a last gasp field goal, winning the game for the Lions in what was almost a great comeback by the Packers. Ben, your thoughts on the game?
I didn't think Thursday Night Football could be as good as that. The Detroit Lions just look absolutely spectacular right now. The way that Jared Goff is playing is like, what a great advertisement for quarterbacks who have been sort of written off. That people we're not giving the Lions as much credit as they deserve for the way they've worked with Jared Goff. The way that he has become one of the most efficient and reliable quarterbacks in the NFL. When he was drafted into the league, it was thought that he could be a star. He could be someone who you can ride all the way to the Super Bowl. And it wasn't really like that when he was at the Rams. He did go to Super Bowl with them, but it was not necessarily in spite of him, but it wasn't because of him. It was because of Sean McVay. The Lions have been able to just put him in a position to make plays on such a regular basis, make good decisions. He's got a fantastic offensive line. The offensive line was I would say good, not great against the Packers, but still just putting him in these positions where he isn't going to make mistakes. He can make some elite throws, and he is right now, a contender for NFL MVP. And the Detroit Lions are having the best season that they have had in the Super Bowl era. Lions fans must be absolutely thrilled. Their team is so much fun to watch. They're beating their rivals. They are cruising into the playoffs. And now Lions fans are just thinking about playoff seedings, how far are they going to go? It's not, will we make the playoffs? Will we win games in the playoffs? Lions fans are thinking, are we winning the Super Bowl? And you know what? You might.
They're certainly up there as one of the contenders. I think they are right now the best team in football. And you mentioned Goff. I think what I love is the fact that he seems such a team guy. I mean, I saw when on the Thanksgiving game, they got the turkey. The first thing he did, he gave the turkey to his teammates, then give it to himself. And he constantly praises this team, never really praised himself. And I think that's a testament to his leadership skills and how much I think it really instills into this Lions culture. Dan Campbell's has built in the franchises that they're all about team first. They're not about individuals. There's no egos. When you think about the running back room, Jameer Gibbs and Montgomery could have easily, fallen out over, who's can get them more reps, who's starting the RB1. And they both just love helping each other out, blocking for each other when they're not on the ball. And it's just a really good sort of feel-good factor in this Detroit team right now. And it probably is the earliest in years, certainly Super Bowl era, they've ever qualified for the playoffs. Not even week 15, they already made the playoffs. And But the one caveat I have is only, albeit the last 2 games or so, but the defense is allowing a lot of points lately. They allowed 31 against the Packers on Thursday night. A week before that, they almost collapsed against the Bears. I mean, does that worry you a little bit? The fact that you saw Jared Goff through 5 picks, albeit they still won, but most days they'd have lost that game against the Texans. Do you think, does that worry you a little bit? As good as they've been, the offensive line, the offense has been amazing, but there's a little bit of, we've seen recent weeks, the defense is starting to give up points. Does that worry you a little bit going into down the stretch when it comes to a big game against the likes of the Eagles or the Packers or whoever they face in the playoffs, or even the Chiefs or the Bills in the Super Bowl? Does that worry you, the fact that the defense has been a bit shaky in recent weeks?
The Bears game was a weird one. I think the Lions just thought they'd won the game and they took their foot off the pedal and the Bears came back. At that point, the Bears had been doing that, coming back every week. They just seem to kind of have this knack, and the Lions let them do that. The Packers are obviously a different proposition. They're much better coached. The way that the Lions defense, it was the Lions defense in that first half that really kind of set them up for victory in the second half, because they gave Jordan Love no time to do anything really. The way that they kept kind of in his face was ridiculous. Jordan Love looked a bad quarterback in that first half. The defense in the second half, not so good. The points the points were coming for Green Bay, but this is a good offense, and it's like the way that this Lions team is built, they can grind out a win. They can win a shootout. I'm not too worried by the fact that they allowed quite a few points against another playoff contender. I was more worried the fact that it was close and that they let Green Bay come back into it. I'm a bit worried with the way they let the Bears come back into it, but I think that was complacency. I think with the Packers game, it was the fact that the Packers just managed to kind of change the scheme and sort of see what Detroit was doing on defense and exploit that. The Lions are well coached, and they do have a good defense, and the offense is always going to score points. So the defense only has to do a certain amount. When you've got an offensive line that good, when you've got, like you say, those running backs who are happy to share carries, and it doesn't have to be me, that they want to win. There is a special energy around the Lions right now, and yeah, the defense hasn't been great the last couple of weeks, but it's not enough to make me think, ooh, maybe they're not a serious contender. Right now, to me, it feels like it's them or the Eagles representing the NFC. The Detroit Lions, the route to the Super Bowl at the moment has got to go through Detroit, and I don't think even their defense is gonna mess that up for them. They've been just too good.
And I think they're the kind of team that if you give them a 10, 12-point lead, it's very hard to get back from that. I mean, the Packers showed in the game itself that, if they make a mistake, you've got to capitalize on his mistakes. You think about the Keyshawn Nixon interception that resulted in I think it was a Josh Jacobs touchdown. I think that's what you got to do. Because if you allow this team to go 2 touchdowns up, 3 touchdowns up, it's very hard to come back from that. I know the Packers and Bears almost came back, but they still lost. And I think that what the Packers showed for me is that if you've got to beat this Lions team, a bit like, not this year, but years gone by, think about the Man City in years gone by, or, you think about the old Patriots dynasties, that these teams don't make many mistakes, and you've got to just find that little gap and make them try and capitalize on it. And I think the Packers did that in this game. And, you think about the mistakes that the Lions made, I'm pretty sure every time they made a mistake, the Packers scored from it. I could be wrong on that, but I think the Lions are just that well drilled. And I think you've got to give credit to the way it's built with, Penei Sewell, and that offensive line, the offense in general, and the defense has been really good. And I think the Packers will be happy with themselves. I think they showed that they can compete with the good teams, because I think the Packers and me are a slept-on team. I think they could go as far as the title game in the NFC. I think they're that good of a team potential-wise, and that well coached. And I think they show that they can compete with the big boys. You think about all those years ago with the Giants and that team that beat the Patriots the first time around when they almost went unbeaten. And there was a game late on in the season where the Giants took the Patriots to the end and they came really close, and everyone was sort of a little bit then before my time, but I've watched videos about it where everyone was sort of on notice that actually this Giants team is actually quite a good team, and you don't want to play them in the playoffs. What happens? They made the Super Bowl, they go on and win it. I think the Packers showed that if they were to play the Lions again, and I think they'll have to if they want to advance in the playoffs, that they can, they can compete. I know the first time round they played them a bit less of a, a close game, but I think this game for me showed the Packers that they've got a good team there, and I think come the playoffs they've got a good enough team that could beat the Lions or at least run close. I think the Packers, despite losing, will be fairly very happy with the performance all round.
Yeah, they will be in the playoffs, and when you look at the NFC, how many teams really are clearly better than them, other than Detroit? I would say the Eagles are clearly better than them, and that's probably the end of the list. Now, maybe the Vikings are better, maybe the Commanders are better, but probably not the Seahawks, maybe not the Bucks. They shouldn't have to fear anyone, and they will be able to. They'll look at the fact they've lost to Detroit twice. They improved massively in the second game against Detroit compared with the previous time where it wasn't as competitive, and they'll have learned things. So I think they're going to be a tough team in the playoffs, especially if they can get home games, but they're not going to win that division, clearly. And that division is absolutely brutal. You've got 3 playoff teams there, and there still could be wins that are taken away from teams that ruin their seeding and prevent them from playing a home game. So, look out for that NFC North in the run-in, because it's going to have massive ramifications for the whole NFC playoff picture in terms of who plays who and where those games are played.
Yeah, it's absolutely massive, and I think the NFC North is to have 3 teams in the. I think it's all about like you've got 3 teams in the playoffs from the same division. I think it just shows the strength of both North divisions. Think about the AFC North as well. They've got the Steelers and the Ravens, 2 very good teams. And I think that the Browns, had they started Winston earlier, maybe have a few more wins under their belt. But this NFC North is, I think, the best division in the league. I think we're talking about the AFC East before the season started. People talking about maybe the AFC North, but I think the NFC North has been the best division. I mean, even the Bears, they have been great, but apart from that, the other 3 teams have been amazing, really. 10 wins for 11 wins now for the Vikings, 9 wins for the Packers, 12 wins for the Lions. It's been a great year, and I think that you could really see all 3 teams in the divisional round. You could genuinely see all 3 teams in the divisional round, depending on how seeding goes. I doubt any of them are going to be the 4th seed. The Lions are going to be the top seeds. They'll probably avoid one of the teams. So I think, you could genuinely see all 3 NFC North teams making it to the divisional round, depending on who they face, of course. Moving on to the Sunday slate, 6 p.m. games saw the Vikings move on to 11-2 after their 42-21 win over the Falcons, as Kirk Cousins is booed on his return to Minnesota. His 4th straight game now without a touchdown. The Saints narrowly beat the Giants by 14-11. The Eagles almost had a shock defeat to the Panthers, but they came out victorious, winning 22-16. The Steelers got revenge on the Browns by winning 27-14 at home, and the Buccaneers beat the Raiders 28-13. And the Jags got just their 3rd win of the season as they beat the Titans by 10-6. And then we will touch on 2 games that really, probably have no real impact on the playoffs. Really, Dolphins maybe, but the Bears not. But our 2 teams did play. The Dolphins did beat the Jets 32-26 in overtime as Jonnu Smith got the winning touchdown, and the Bears did lose to the 49ers by 38-13. Now, heading on to the Dolphins first, it was good to see the Dolphins show some ability to win in important moments. The Jets aren't a good team, so you can't really say they've been a good team or been a winning team, which has been their sort of constant criticism the last few years. But I think for me, it was good to see, particularly Tua, who I've been a big critic of really most of his time in a Dolphins jersey. It was good to see him come out on a drive and firstly get that drive that got the field goal that got to overtime, and then have that drive that we had to then go out and win the game with that touchdown from Jonnu Smith. And I think it was obviously the kick return from Washington was big help in that. But for me, it was really good seeing a guy who has been criticised for his ability to not win in big moments to actually go out and do that. And in what was an important game, because that game would have I don't know whether mathematically would have ruled us out, but it would have pretty much all but ruled us out of playoff contention. But that win, with the Colts and Broncos on bye weeks, Chargers losing as well, it's only 2 wins now between us and the playoff spot. And the Chargers still have to play the Chiefs, same with the Broncos. Not the Chargers, but the Broncos have to play the Chiefs. They both got really tough schedules, and I think that we've got a tough schedule as well. Think about the Niners and the Texans coming up. It's a tough schedule still to have, but I think without a win and the loss for the Chargers and the other two teams not playing, there's a chance. And I think whilst it's going to be a tough road, I was just really happy to see the Dolphins actually win in an important moment. But Ben, what was your thought as an outsider looking in on the Dolphins win over the Jets?
I thought they were going to completely mess it up in the way that they made the Jets look like a good team, and the Jets are not a good team, and they looked it for a while. And if you were watching that game in isolation, you didn't know everything else that had happened this season, you might feel like, oh yeah, the Jets are a good team. They're not a good team. The Dolphins really, really flattered them, gave them a little bit too much respect. I think the Jets got over 400 yards on offense, which is unlike them. But then the way that they came back, the character that the Dolphins showed, and the leadership of Tua Tagovailoa, and I am pro Tua, or at least I was until he got his most recent concussion, and I felt that he should probably retire. I'm worried about what's gonna happen to him. I loved seeing him put the team on his shoulders and bring them roaring back. It was I was chatting with so on our Friday Edge Rush podcast with Nat Coombs and Ollie Thornton. This was one of the games that we were picking, and Nat was keen on the Dolphins in this game, and so was I, and we thought, oh, we've completely messed this one up. And Nat's a Dolphins fan as well, so it was particularly sweet for him because he'd been really stumping for this as a win, and also it being his team. The Jets are out of playoff contention now mathematically. I mean, sensibly they were out of it before, but Miami, because of the way that they came back. Now, I don't think it was a super impressive win, but the character that they showed makes me feel a little bit more confident about their prospects of making the playoff. So Dolphins fans should be very pleased, not just because they once again put the Jets in their place, embarrassed Aaron Rodgers, beat a team that they love to beat, but still in it. Absolutely still in it. And if they go on a run and sneak in now, I don't think that's a team you want to play. Because if the Dolphins get in, that means they really hit some form. Maybe it means they finish 10-7. They will be on fire. It will mean that Tua is playing well. And at that point, it's a dangerous team. So I'm really happy for the Dolphins. Not a vintage performance, but you make that sort of comeback. You show that sort of character. You've shown me something, and that counts in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I'm fully aware that we've beaten, 3 bad teams in the Raiders, Pats, and Jets. But you think about, we gone 4-1 the last 5 games since starting 2-6, and I think I mentioned it before. The schedules to the Broncos and the Chargers. I mean, they got to play each other first of all. Chargers got to play the Bengals. The Broncos got to play the Bengals, and Bengals, as bad as the defense has been, they've got an amazing offense that can score a lot of points. And then they play the Chiefs on the final day, which, albeit could be, a team they could rest some starters with that division sewn up. But, it's not that. And the Colts as well. And they're a good team on their day. So the Broncos have got quite a tough schedule. And then you think about, as well, the Chargers schedule. They've got to play the Raiders and the Patriots. That's probably 2 wins there. But the Patriots have put up a fight in a lot of the games. They've had a lot of close scoring games. And then I mentioned the Chargers game. Then they've got to play the Buccaneers next week. So, there's some tough games there, and I think us playing the Texans, I think the O-line has been really bad for Stroud. I think he's the most sacked quarterback in the league. So I think we are, the second least team with sacks this year. But I think if we can, that O-line's been that bad, we could, get to him. Like Zach Sealer could have a day against that O-line. So they've been a bit up and down. You can beat them. The Niners have been very up and down. I mean, no McCaffrey anymore. Obviously, they lost loads of other players like Deebo Samuel, only 6 and 7. They haven't been great, really, this season. So I think, two teams that you probably would expect to lose at the start of the year, actually now, they're the teams we could actually go in and beat. I mean, the Packers, we were always going to lose to the Packers. They're a good team, but I think there's definitely room there for a 4-game straight win. A 4-win streak easily. And I think with these tough games for the Chargers and the Broncos, I think it's definitely within reach. I think they've given it like a 15% probability on NFL website, but I think it should be looked at more than that, because I think this team could easily go 4-0 the next 4 games.
Yeah, they are winnable games, and they've got that mentality now of, oh, we will win, rather than, oh, I hope we win. They showed yesterday that they have the attitude of, well, we should win these games. And yes, some of those wins in the last month or so have been against teams that you'd think, well, yeah, you should beat those teams if you've got any shot at the playoffs. But, this is the NFL, and unexpected results happen every week. So just taking care of business is not taken for granted and shouldn't be sniffed at. You can't just look at those games and be like, oh, well, these are just bad teams. They're just taking care of business. Taking care of business is half the battle. They just need to keep taking care of business.
Well, we'll move on to a team that's not taking care of business. Sadly for you, Ben, your Bears. 4-9 after this loss, 38-13 to the Niners. It was another difficult day for the Bears. I mean, only 38 yards for DeAndre Swift rushing, so the run game couldn't get going. Your best receiver was DJ Moore, was 49 yards. Caleb Williams only got 134 yards passing. It's just Cole Kmet, not even a single. I don't know whether he's injured or whether he just didn't play, but he didn't get a single target or reception. It's just, I think it's another example of what's been a really difficult season for the Chicago Bears.
Were we at Tottenham together when the Bears beat the Jags? Were we there together? That was the last time they won a game.
Was it? Because I remember I was with you for one of the games. I remember me, you, Sky, and I believe it was either Freddie or Gareth were there after the game as well. I'm guessing it was a Bears game, but it could have been.
I think it was that game. That feels like a long time ago, right? That was the last time the Bears won a game.
Yeah, because they were 4-2, weren't they? I was thinking back then, 4-2. Williams looks elite. This is a game where he's woken up in the NFL and he's announced himself and all this stuff. And I thought this Bears team could actually make the playoffs. But
yeah, I mean, at that point, it was 4-2. They had the bye, and then they had a game against the Commanders, which they were bad in. Don't get me wrong, they were bad, but they still should have won that game because it was that ridiculous Hail Mary that was. They just didn't concentrate. Like, you just got to concentrate on that play and you win the game. And then they had winnable games on paper against teams they are more talented than, the Cardinals and the Patriots. They were not competitive in those games. And at that point, it was clear that something was rotten. So we then realized that after that Commanders game, the Bears players, who already did not particularly like Matt Eberflus, really took against him. So they felt that after that debacle against Washington, that the coaches, and specifically him, did not take any accountability, yet were calling out players and punishing players for mistakes that they had made in that game. And the players felt, well, the coaches are just as much to blame. The coaches made poor decisions at the end. They let the Commanders get closer and closer to even have the shot of a Hail Mary because of the particular play calling. I don't think there was a team in the NFL where the players and the coaches were further apart, and they seemed to be no effort against the Patriots and the Cardinals. This was a team that had decided they were not interested. The coaches couldn't get through to them. They didn't respect the head coach. And then they had this run of games where they just probably should have won. Like they probably should have beaten the Packers. They probably should have beaten the Vikings. And when it came to it, they probably should have at very least gone to overtime against the Detroit Lions. And obviously that was the last straw. It was each of the games that they had lost that they probably should have won, of those 4, each of them, there was at least one ridiculous call by Matt Eberflus that you could say, well, that cost them the game. And the players knew that. And the players were talking off the record to local journalists about this and how the coaches were causing the problems. And then after that Lions game, when players were being asked about the play calling, they were just saying no comment. And that spoke volumes. Then obviously Eberflus was fired the next day, and the interim offensive coordinator became the interim head coach. And Thomas Brown was only the interim offensive coordinator because the players didn't want Shane Waldron. So eventually they fired Shane Waldron. Brown was promoted from passing game coordinator to offensive coordinator to then very quickly interim head coach. Now, Thomas Brown is a guy who the players absolutely adore. They have got so much respect for him. So I was very curious, how will they come out against San Francisco? Because the Bears are a team that have not scored the first points in any game this season. They have trailed at the start of every single game. How will they come out? They came out so flat. The effort was non-existent. It was the worst performance of the season. Now, they were still right to fire Eberflus. Eberflus needed to go. He probably shouldn't be a head coach anyway, and he was the wrong head coach for this group of players. There are lots of people on that roster who want Thomas Brown to be the permanent head coach. Thomas Brown had this big moment on stage, and he basically flubbed his lines. He was like the play calling was poor. He's doing something he's not particularly qualified to do. I think he will be a head coach one day, but this is too early for him. It was an absolute disaster. They made the 49ers look like the playoff contenders we thought they would be at the start of the season, but that we now know they are not. The roster is too thin. We knew it was potentially a top-heavy roster, and they've lost some star players, and they look very, very ordinary. They looked amazing against the Bears. And yes, maybe the 49ers really turned it on that day, and maybe they deserve some more credit. But I think if anyone who watched that game or watches it back, they will see that the Bears were so bad. So bad. Worst performance of the season in what has been a historically bad season for them anyway. And at that point, I felt there is no chance that Thomas Brown is getting this job on a permanent basis. I cannot see any way that what he can do in the next 4 games makes anyone forget what happened against the 49ers and makes people think, here's a guy who can win a Super Bowl as a head coach. There's no point appointing a head coach who you don't think can win you a Super Bowl. I don't think the Bears will view him that way. And I have to be careful what I say here, right? But there are things that I know that are sort of things are kind of in flux at Hallis Hall. There are problems there, there are issues, and it goes pretty deep within the organization. I think there is things are in flux, and they've got to figure out how committed are we to winning football games rather than simply building a stadium and a retail complex, which seems to be priority number one, and how ruthless are we going to be? Like they seemed very nervous about sacking Matt Eberflus, and they went about it in a pretty slack way in that they let him do a press conference and then fired him a couple of hours later. Surely, if you think you might fire him, don't put him in front of the media and put him in that awkward position. There's a lot of questions and a lot of blame to go around within that organization right now. Things could get worse before they get better. It's a prime destination for a head coach. It's a massive media market. A lot of money can be made there, and you have a franchise quarterback. But if the organization appears dysfunctional, then the caliber of candidates that want that job is going to be lower. And how much do you trust the organization to make the right picks? They have not picked the right head coach in a long time, and they tend to oscillate. They'll go for someone who's very much an offensive guy and is a wild offensive guy. And then they'll be like, oh, we've got to get an old school defensive coach. So they after Lovie Smith, a very defensive coach, they went to Mark Trestman, a CFL coach. They got the guy from like the Montreal Alouettes, and we love his offense. He's nothing like Lovie. Let's bring him in. What a surprise. It was a disaster. And then they're like, let's get John Fox, the most boring defensive guy we can find, who took the job and seemed to be in early retirement already. He couldn't even remember the names of the players. That went badly. Oh, do you know what? We need a hot offensive guy. Let's get Matt Nagy from the Chiefs. That doesn't work out. Oh, let's go for a boring defensive guy. They get Matt Eberflus, someone who no one else was interested in as a head coach. My guess is they're going to go for a hot offensive guy now because that's what they like to do. God knows what will happen. I feel like I've been ranting for about 20 minutes now, Andy. I apologize. The best thing about being able to work professionally covering the NFL as I do is that I am not a normal fan anymore. Also, that's the worst thing. I am not a normal fan anymore, which means I don't get to enjoy the highs as a Bears fan because I'm viewing everything through a media lens. However, those highs are very rare. So I don't know if I am missing out on anything, but I'm very pleased that as a professional, I can't get too invested in what the Bears do week to week because I take my eye off the ball. Until I'm paid purely to cover the Bears, I've got to cover everything. And thank God, Andy, because I would be miserable and angry if I had to just be a Bears fan right now. And for all you Bears fans listening, don't think I don't get it. Please don't think I don't get it. I get it. I get it better than you know. It infuriates me. Last night's performance was an embarrassment. It was disgusting. It was disgusting. I never want to see that from a Bears team ever again. And you know what? We're probably going to see it a couple more times before the end of the season. And then God knows who the coach will be. And then we'll probably start to see it again some more. It's such a waste. So much potential on that roster. And it's an absolute waste. Rant over.
Do you know, I said it before that I picked my NFL team before ever watching a game because of a family holiday. And I've always said that if I'd watched the NFL for the first time properly and not known anything about had no team already booked, it would have been the Bears because I love the stadium in the city. But I'm so glad having watched how dysfunctional this team's been. For a team that had the number one overall pick with a 7-9 record, to have this bad a season, I'm so glad I wasn't a Bears fan because I don't think I could have been able to cope. No 4,000-yard passer in the team's history. It's just been year after year. I mean, the double doink year, you could look back at that as well. Just from my memory, I've never really known the Bears to be good. Same with the Commanders until this year. Apart from that one year the Bears had, was it 2018? Never really had ever really seen a good Bears team. I missed the 2006, team that got to the Super Bowl, lost to the Colts. It's never been a really good team. And yeah, I think it's all round has been an absolute mess. I mean, you mentioned potential new head coaches. What I've seen linked a lot is Cliff Kingsbury. Not sure how you feel about that with his Caleb Williams connection. And
I don't love it, Andy. I'll be honest. I don't love it. There is a logic there, but the knock on him is that he's great for the first half of the season until everyone figures out the offense, and then it goes downhill. And it has started to do that a bit with Jaden Daniels. And you're right, 7-9 or whatever it was last season, and then getting the first overall pick, and then to go downhill, at least in terms of the record. You would think, oh, God, that quarterback must be a problem. No, the quarterback is the one thing that Bears fans are like, okay, well, this is weird. We're not worrying about the quarterback. It's everything other than the quarterback. I mean, that's not to say Bears fans feel like, oh, he's the finished article, but it's clear. It's clear that he is a fantastic quarterback in difficult circumstances. I mean, he's not thrown an interception for about a month and a half, despite the fact that he's getting nowhere near as much help. This is why it will be an attractive job for some offensive whiz kid because we know that's what they're going to want to do. I don't know. I don't love the idea of Cliff Kingsbury. I feel he's a bit of a one-trick pony, better as an offensive coordinator, but he's going to be in the mix, absolutely. And I'm sure he would love to work with Caleb again. And Caleb would probably love to work with him again. And Caleb will have some sort of say in the process. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I'm sure some people feel like, wait, he's a rookie and he's going to get involved in picking the head coach. It's the most important player on the roster. If you don't get a head coach that clicks with him, which is what we've had as for the Bears. I mean, my God, if Caleb desperately wanted Cliff Kingsbury, then I'll listen. I mean, I probably won't be involved in the process, but who knows at this rate?
You never know. You could see, you get a new role there. You could be the head of, I don't know, player liaison, or you could be the head of scouts. We could see next year Ben Isaac, being pictured on the Bears website as one of the members of staff.
Oh, yeah. I've got some stories I could tell about that, but yeah, maybe one day.
Maybe. I mean, before we move on to the final two games, I mean, one thing I will give you hope, as you mentioned before, the fact that a lot of the losses have been by close margins. I mean, only 5 points to the Texans in week 2, 5 points again to the Colts in week 3. Only lost by 3 points to the Commanders. We all know what happened then in week 8. Obviously, some losses were by quite a lot, but then you lost by 1 point to the Packers in overtime against the Vikings, and then by 3 points against the Lions. So I think, despite all of the negativity, I think it's not been the losses haven't been too bad in some of the games. So I think there's definitely reason to be somewhat positive. And you mentioned the callback as well, no pick in the last month and a half. So yeah, absolutely. I think there's definitely a lot to be moaning about, but also I think there's definitely not as bad as maybe the record suggests. But you probably know more than me and probably think it's all a disaster. But
no, there is truth in that. I mean, there are games there that they could have, should have won in ridiculous. And that Packers game, I mean, I was there for that. When that field goal was blocked, when everyone just assumed the Bears would keep running some plays and get closer, and for some reason, Eberflus decided, no, we're just going to run the clock out. Like, why not just get closer? Why not get closer? We're doing okay running the ball at the middle. Just get closer. Just run a couple of plays. They could have won those games, and then you'd have a situation where Eberflus is probably still in a job, and you might have a situation where they nick a couple of wins, and it's harder to fire him, and then you've probably gone backwards, even though you've won more games. They have, in the games they've won early in the season, they look good, and then they looked good in that Packers game. They were clearly the best team in that Packers game. With the Lions, it was a comeback because the Lions got complacent. The Vikings, again, it was a comeback. Washington, it was a comeback. They've looked good in some of these games, and the record is probably not a fair reflection on how they've performed, but it's a very interesting and revealing reflection on the team. So it's not all bad. With the right coaches, this is a playoff team. So, and with a little bit of luck this season, they'd be right in the playoff mix. Not necessarily deserved, but though they're fine margins. The glass is half empty, but it's going to be very easy for a coach to fill it up.
And I can't imagine what that'd be like for a Bears fan to see in your home stadium the Packers win like that. I mean, would it have been your first win against the Packers in a lot of years? And I can't imagine to actually be there as well, and then have what I imagine is your most hated team out of the 3 in the NFC North, to see them, win like that. I can't imagine what that must have been like. That must have been a horrible feeling.
Do you know what? It was really tough, but I think I would have felt worse at home watching on TV. I think I would have. Maybe because I was just there drinking and shouting, and I was part of it. And it was a great. I mean, I'd been in Manhattan, Kansas. I'd been at a K-State game the day before. We'd flown to Chicago very early in the morning. Like, we'd left the hotel at like 5 a.m. to get to Chicago. My breakfast was beer. Got to the tailgate. The first thing I consumed all day was beer before I was eating at the tailgate. It was a great day in Chicago. There's a few of us there. It was a great day, apart from that play. So it was horrible losing in that way, but I actually did really enjoy it. But there were two Japanese visitors right in front of us who were Packers fans, who looked like they were having the time of their lives at certain points, and at the end of the game, they just seemed absolutely stunned. And I did then think, I wish I was getting that. I wish I was getting that pleasure that they're getting right now. But it might be that's the first game they've ever been to see. It's not easy to get from Japan. It's not on the the doorstep of like getting to the Midwest to watch a Bears-Packers game. Maybe it's the first and only Packers game they'll ever get to see. Who knows? I'm not saying I'm happy for them, but I get it. I've seen the Bears enough times. It was a bit of a sickener, but well, it sounds stupid. It was such a great day apart from that one play. I would love to have that back, or get Eberflus to actually coach like a sensible person and get those extra yards rather than just be like, oh yeah, it'll be fine. But yeah, good day apart from that.
Well, we'll move on to a team that had a great day, the Los Angeles Rams. I mean, they beat the Bills 44-42 in what was easily the best game of the season. I mean, the only thing missing, I think, was maybe more times, maybe more back and front. It seemed like the whole time was just the Rams being the Bills cutting their lead, rather than maybe like the Bills Chiefs where it was back and forth who was leading. But other than that, it was an amazing game. I mean, Josh Allen was the first quarterback in history to throw for 3 touchdowns and rush for 3 touchdowns, 342 yards, 6 total touchdowns. Matt Stafford had over 300 yards, 2 touchdowns as well. I mean, 2 touchdowns for Kieran Williams. Puka Nacua was the other star of the game. He had 162 yards, 2 total touchdowns. Cup, almost 100 yards as well, 1 touchdown. I mean, just what a game this was. What a game this was.
I picked this on edge rush as my Drew lock. I was confident the Bills were going to cover. I felt there was good value. It was like 4.5 points, 3.5 points, something like that. And I thought the Rams are getting overvalued here, I think, in part because the Bills have got to travel to the West Coast, which actually they've been fine doing, and it's easier going that way than it is for the West Coast teams flying to the East Coast. I thought the way that Josh Allen is playing, the Rams, Stafford has been a bit banged up. I think the Rams are good, but I just don't see how they can hang with the Bills. I thought the Bills are going to win this by like 7 to 10 points, and I think the defense will come up with the goods. And I couldn't have been more wrong. The Rams were able to just move the ball at will, and it was very clear from an early stage in that game. I'd put on the group chat, yeah, my Drew lock's not coming in. You know, it was clear that if the Bills did win that game, there's no way they were going to win by any more than say 3 points. They could maybe squeak a win. Josh Allen, MVP performance, absolutely unreal. Like you say, that record, the first person to throw for 3 and run for 3 in the same game. He did everything that he could have done. He looked so deflated after that game, where I guess it's one where you feel like, well, what more could I have done? But you are up against some of the best coaches that you can face. Sean McVay, I am still in awe of him every single week. The things that he can do. I don't think that Rams roster is brilliant. How much he gets out of them is absolutely fantastic. If you put his coaching performance against Sean McDermott's performance yesterday, then it was like an annihilation, really. There was some poor play calling from the Bills. This Rams team is looking more and more like a playoff team. You know, they've had some weird games this season where they've lost and looked really, really bad. You know, the Bears beat them and deservedly beat them. I really like this Rams team. I know that some have been high on them for a while. It took me a while to get to that point, but I just felt, no, they're not going to beat the Bills. And my God, it was game of the season, highest scoring game of the season, super exciting. Both teams playing at such a high level, but that Bills defense really let them down. And I really felt that it was going to come good.
I mean, this has been the story of their team the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, think of the Bills game, the Bills Chiefs game, that famous game. Defense was playing well; they would have probably won that game. Think about most years in the playoffs, it's been down to their defense, not really Josh Allen. While they've lost games in big moments, so I think that is a worry for them. I think as good as he's been, and Josh Allen to have that record I mentioned before, and also week before, the first callback to throw, catch, and run for a touchdown, in the same game. I mean, he's putting up some amazing performances, and I think that performance, as well, really emphasises MVP credentials. I mean, he's on paper the both perfect quarterback. He's got the arm talent. He's got the size. This year, he's cut down on only 5 interceptions. He's cut down on that area part of his game. So I think you look at him pound for pound, he is the perfect quarterback in everything. It's just been a shame for him that it's often been either some games where has been error prone, interception friendly, or been games where the defense has simply just not helped him out. And I do worry that for him, that is it a Dan Marino situation where, from what I've seen from clips, it looks like the defense was often the problem more than Dan Marino for the Dolphins all those years ago. And I think the Bills are going to have to, if they want to try and advance and make a Super Bowl, which I think they could this year, that defense is going to have to improve quickly, because you put them up against the Chiefs or the Ravens, or they make a Super Bowl against the Lions, they stand no chance against the Lions. If that's how the defense is going to play, how bad it is in that game, they got no chance of winning one. But I think what it proved to me is that if you've got Josh Allen, then anything's possible. You will always be in a game. If you've got Josh Allen, you could be 3 touchdowns down. I think they were at one point against the Rams, I believe, 3 scores down. He can bring you back in the game just like that really quickly, because he can just turn. And I'm saying, as a Dolphins fan, I should be hating Josh Allen, but I just can't. He's just that fun to watch. You just know that he will keep you in games. I think as long as he's their quarterback and healthy, they'll always be a team that's competitive. They will always be a team that's competitive. But no, fair play to the Rams. They only 1 win behind the Seahawks. They got the win against the Cardinals. So 2 win gap between the Seahawks and the Niners. Only a 1 win gap between them and the Rams. So I think for me, this NFC West is probably not the division we thought it'd be start of the year, but I think it's going to be really exciting, and I'm really intrigued to see whether the Rams could actually go out and do it and win this division.
Yeah, 100%. Like, the Rams can be kind of a sneaky, dangerous team. There's going to be 1 or 2 teams in the NFC playoffs who are going to be a bit of a problem, in part because they will be so well coached, and the Rams absolutely fit into that category. They absolutely could be trouble.
Yeah, I think what I want to praise as well is Les Snead. I think he's proved to me, him and Harry Roseman probably are the best general managers in the league, because Les Snead, you think about the last 2 years, they brought in only Jared First, albeit was a first rounder. But apart from that, I mean, Frisk was a second rounder. Puka Nacua was a 5th rounder. The guys last year, Kobe Turner, he was a 3rd or 2nd round pick. Byron Young wasn't the 1st rounder either. So they're buying these guys, despite they've gone for this whole after picks method the last year. They got on that Super Bowl, but they had their first round pick in years, I think, since Jared Goff this year. But they found these little gems in the later rounds, like Turner, like Young, like Nacua, like Frisk, like guys that, no one really expected to be good, apart from Jared Verse, of course. And they're the absolute stars. And I think that's a credit to, you think about the Jags, they could easily be their 3rd in the last 5 years, 1st overall pick if it goes as bad as it is the rest of the year. And you think, when the Lions have proved it as well as the Rams, that if you draft well, if you have a good scouting system, a good overall functional franchise, then you can find these guys without having them 1 overall pick or not having the top pick. So I think got to give Les Snead a huge amount of credit to lose Aaron Donald and then find not just 1 but 2 guys in Verse and Frisk, and as well as the guys last year as well. Yeah, big up Les Snead.
Yeah, 100%. Well said.
Finally, we move on to the Sunday night football game, which again saw the football gods in the Chiefs' favour as they won by 17-19. I mean, I said before in our preview, I thought the Chargers would win this game. I think the Chiefs are a terrible 11-1 team before the game, but once again, it just proves, just how right it's going for them right now. It took a last-second field goal from what's his name? It was a 3rd choice kicker in Wright. Now, this wasn't just a kick that went over. It was a kick that doinked off the crossbar and still winning, which I know for you as a Bears fan probably brings you massive amount of PTSD. Thinking, why couldn't this been us back in the day, Cody Parkey? But, the Chiefs just can't seem to do anything wrong right now. They're playing really badly. I mean, the amount of times, the defense, allowed the Chargers team to get to them. And the same thing, the Chiefs got to the Chargers as well. We saw that with Justin Herbert getting the injury. But just, to get that win again, it's just, as a guy who doesn't like the same team winning again and again, and a lot of people have the same thinking as me, it's just so frustrating to see that.
Yeah, and the thing is obviously then they're not blowing teams out, and it's different when you have a team that everyone's sick of seeing them win, and then they are absolutely brutalizing everyone. You feel like no one can get a glove on them. It feels like they could have lost a lot of games this season. Patrick Mahomes is currently a game manager. His style of play has completely changed, not because he's regressed, not because they decide, okay, we don't want to take those risks, but just because he is being told, here's what to do to win this game under the circumstances. They've got a bit of a weird roster. There's talent in places, there's holes in other places, but they do have still the best quarterback in the league. I know that he's I don't think it's fair, but he is in the MVP discussion. But on the other hand, if it is most valuable player, you take Mahomes out of that team, and it's not his necessarily miracle working, but there was a point on the game-winning drive, there were two fantastic passes on third down that he converted to kind of keep the drive alive and to win that game. He just always does what needs to be done, and it isn't always the prettiest thing. It isn't always a piece of Mahomes magic. It isn't him going into magician mode. It's him going into efficient leader mode. He doesn't know how to lose games. He always expects to win. He gets on with it. He got hit a lot yesterday, and he just kept going. So it just shows kind of how tough he is, the effort that he can do, the fact that he will do anything to win the game. It hasn't got to be all about him. The Chargers actually really did a good job of bottling up Mahomes. But at certain points, there was one particular scramble to get them in field goal range near the end. I'm just still in awe of Patrick Mahomes. I'm still in awe of Andy Reid. But at some point, the luck has to run out, doesn't it?
I agree, and that's why I don't think I think it is Jackson or Allen that make the Super Bowl. I just don't see him. They're going for the three-peat. I know they want to go for that, and they're winning games, not playing well, and that's a sign of a good team. But I just don't see. I don't see it. I just see it being Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, or maybe Justin Herbert on their day. But I just don't see it being Mahomes this year. I don't think they're trying to go for the three-peat, and they could easily prove us all wrong and go and do this. But I don't know. I can still vision. I still see it being Lamar Jackson's year, despite some of the problems in defense for them against the pass. But yeah, I don't see it. But I think what I love, you've pointed out two things I wanted to talk about was the scrambling and the third down, because he's not the fastest quarterback in the league. He's not a Lamar Jackson. He's not a Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, but he makes these clever runs. He makes these little runs just enough to get the first down. And I think he still stands as, I think, out of all the starting quarterbacks, the second best QB rating when it comes to third downs. I mean, there was multiple third downs, and even this goes to many games. There was many games this year where he's done this, where first two downs he's pretty bad. He's making, we saw it last night, incomplete passes, overthrows. But that third down the third down he had, most of them, he was doing the job. I mean, there was a lot of punts, don't get me wrong, but he found Worthy in the second quarter, not long left of the second quarter. And then that one to Travis Kelce just after the 2-minute warning in the fourth quarter was just, again, that's why he's a winner. It was enough to get him in field goal range, or basically enough field goal range for it to be an easy chip shot field goal. It's just one of those ones where I think we saw it with Brady a lot of time. Everyone called him a game manager. Everyone said he didn't have the arm of someone like, I don't know, Brett Favre or something. But, he got the job done. He got the job done. And he never had the best of Stephen Cole. He had Randy Moss for 1 year, but apart from that, Amendola, Edelman weren't elite receivers, certainly in the regular season, but they knew how to get it done. And I think we got an aging Hopkins, Xavier Worthy. These guys aren't, Cole Hartman as well. These guys aren't elite receivers, but you can guarantee when it comes to the playoffs, they'll find a way. And I think that is down to a lot of time. Same as Brady and Amendola or Edelman or Chris Hogan back in the day, throw back to him. This is the guy that makes the guys around him play better. There's no way. You see Kadarius Toney, how bad do you think did he have a drop yesterday for the Browns, or was it the week before? He dropped the ball there, and he's not been great really anywhere apart from that run he had with Mahomes. And huge credit to him. And I think whilst I think it will run out eventually, and I think we will see whether it's this year or next year, they won't win a Super Bowl. I don't see them doing a 3-peat or even a 4-peat. But you've got to give him huge credit, and Andy Reid as well. Just for getting the job done, and the defense, of course, has done a great job. That defense could have easily, that Bills defense, if they were there in that game, they probably would have allowed 40 points against the Chargers. But the Chiefs, Chris Jones was excellent, I thought, yesterday. Got to Herbert a lot of times, and But overall, probably a good thing for the Dolphins. The Chargers lost because they're now still within our grasp. But I think the Chiefs, you've got to give them huge credit. Unbelievable spirit in that team as they move on to 12-1 and win the division as well, win the AFC West. I believe the second team to clinch the division. Either way, fair play to the Chiefs. But we will end the podcast there, our Week 14 review. So once again, huge thanks, Ben, for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Always love talking with you, Andy.
Well, likewise, mate, and I'll always have you on. I will have you on again at some point in the future. And of course, Ben has mentioned it, alluded to it. He is a part of the Nat Coombs Show, so do check that out on all podcast networks. And if you are watching on YouTube, you can see his handle there, Tweets from Ben. If you are listening, that's how you find him on socials, if you haven't already come across Ben's work. But in the meantime, this has been the Across the Pod NFL Podcast Week 14 review with your host, Andy Davis, and our guest today, Ben Isaacs. And we'll see you guys next time.